Googled buzzwords principals are looking for in an interview. We need to have a serious talk. Hi, my name is Helena. If you're new to this channel, I am the creator of The Present Teacher, and thank you so much for joining me this week. So let's talk about if you're saying this in an interview, then we need to have a talk. So here are some common phrases that I've had a lot of the teacher clients that I've worked with, and a lot of teachers ask me if they should use in their interview answers. Things like lifelong learners, career readiness, building relationships, etc. These are all different common phrases that a lot of teachers are using. And while I don't have a problem with you necessarily using them if you're using them out of genuine use, the problem is if you're just inserting these words randomly because you think admin's looking for that word this year, here's the problem. You're not the only one looking out for these words. A lot of teachers are researching different words to use in their interview, and districts can really tell if you are using them in an authentic way or a disingenuous way. So now that we talked about some common phrases, let's talk about why these don't work. So number one, I already touched on this, but everyone else is using them. Everyone else is using the same Google, same search engines to find buzzwords to use in their interviews. And the problem is once you use it and everyone else uses it, it just doesn't come off as effective. The committees can tell when you are word stuffing to say buzzwords they are looking for. We also talked about this. As someone who's been on interview committees, I can tell when someone is just saying what they think I want to hear versus when they're actually passionate about what they're talking about and they're saying it out of genuine use and not just for the sake of hoping to say a word that I'm looking for in the interview. And the next one is they can tell when you're not being genuine and forcing it, like I mentioned earlier. They can tell if you're just spraying or spreading different buzzwords throughout your interview versus genuinely using those words authentically. So now that we talked about if you're saying these phrases, we need to have a talk and what phrases those are. Let's talk about what to say instead. So instead of going on Google or any AI resource and asking for a list of buzzwords to use in your interview, let's figure out your core values. By this, I mean, what do you stand for? Why are you teaching? What are you passionate about? Because the reality is we're all different and we're all passionate about different things. I personally am passionate about mental health in the classroom and making students feel seen, heard, and understood, and being as present as possible as a teacher and having systems run in the background so I can be present as a teacher, so I can help be there for my students and hold space for when they need me. And I genuinely don't want to miss those important moments when a student is asking for help. And that has a lot to do with my history. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, make sure to check out my book, That New Teacher Next Door. In chapter 1, I dive deep into that. But figure out your core values. Why are you teaching? What are you passionate about? What do you stand for? And the reason we want to talk about this is because when you figure out what you're passionate about, you have a topic then to answer in your interview questions. You're not just hitting buzzwords, you're talking from a space where you're actually interested and genuine and authentically you. And you're passionate, and districts are going to be able to tell when you're genuinely passionate about what you're talking about. And I've said this a million times, but when you have an aligned interview, it honestly feels like having a coffee chat with a future best friend where you just rant and talk about things you're passionate about, and it feels like it clicks and it's a perfect fit. That's what a good interview feels like, and that's what we're going for. We don't want to go through an over-rehearsed line by line interview. That's not what we do here at The Present Teacher. We do it out of genuine authenticity and passion. So first, figure out your core values. Come up with a couple reasons why you're teaching, and like I said, yours probably aren't mine, especially from my past experiences. You have different experiences and reasons why you teach. Get clear on what those are. After you've done that, apply to districts with the same core values. Maybe I'm really passionate as a ESL indoors teacher of creating an inclusive environment. So I'm going to look for districts that are implementing that. Maybe I'm passionate about doing more hands-on learning and less technology. I'm going to look for districts and schools that are resonate with that and are implementing that so I can be passionate in my interview and talk about why I think this is a great fit and why I'm passionate about that. So go through and apply to districts that have those same core values. And when you show up for the interviews, you're going to feel a lot more aligned and a lot more confident because who you are is enough and you're worthy because you are, and you don't have to pretend to be interested in something that you're not. You're acting out of place out of just being genuine. Next, show how you genuinely feel about those values and how you live out those values. So let's use less technology in the classroom, for example. You can talk about why are you passionate about not using technology as much in the classroom or not relying on it so much. You can talk about different examples from teaching that you've done and why X, Y, and Z. And when you have genuine reasons why, districts can resonate with that and recognize that, and it's going to help build your case that much stronger and make your interview process that much more smooth. And then make sure to share specific examples of those values. So going back to, let's say, the diverse or inclusive environment, maybe I'm going to talk about different ways that I've created an inclusive environment in the past because I know that's something that district and I share in common. And I'm just going to naturally talk about it because it's something we're both passionate about. And notice when I do that, I'm no longer listing, hey, here are my qualities. Is this a good fit or not? I'm saying no, that I know this is what you're looking for. This is what I'm looking for too. And here's why I think we're a good match. That's the difference in your interview. So let's talk about a framework that I talk about in my resource or my experience, Land Your Dream Job. That is my program or experience for teachers who are looking everywhere from the research phase all the way to the actual interview day to the post-interview process. But inside this program and this resource, I use a framework I created called REMI. So REMI from Ratatouille. I might be aging myself here, but REMI. And we're going to use that to answer interview questions using those values you came up with that you realize that you and your district that you're applying to both resonate with. So the first thing is restate. You're going to restate the question in an answer form. It's the same thing we teach our kids to do when they answer a question. They don't just give the answer. They start off by referring back to the question to answer. The reason that we do this is, one, it makes a more complete answer, but it also gives you time to think through your answer before you answer it. The next thing is example. So answer the question, but use a specific example. So if I get the question, tell me about your teaching experience, and I know this district is looking for an inclusive learning environment, and that's something that I'm passionate about and I genuinely share values with, I'm going to highlight that in my answer. I'm going to give specific examples of things I've done in the past. And then mission. You're going to refer back to their mission and your mission as a teacher and how they align. I know this is something that your district is passionate about, or this is something that I'm passionate about because XYZ. And then end with your it factor. The reality is you stand out from other teachers. We're not like every other candidate that applies, and you need to figure out what makes you stand out from other teachers. And I talk about this a ton in Land Your Dream Job, my program that I talked about earlier. But also, if you want to look through some of the resources I already have from past week's content, we touch on it slightly too there as well. But what makes you stand out from other teachers, and use that to answer your interview question. Now that we talked about using Remy from Ratatouille, let's talk about the identity shift here we're talking about instead of using the same buzzwords as everyone else. So you don't chase buzzwords. You're not going through and Googling and researching on AI, which buzzwords to use because you know who you are and you know what you stand for. You don't need buzzwords because who you are authentically is enough. You articulate your values with confidence during interviews. You know what you stand for, you've listed it out, you've done your research, you know that this is an aligned district that has and shares those same values. So all you get to do is you get to show up and talk about what you're passionate about. And the final step that we're going to talk about is how to take action. So take one general interview question that you get asked a lot. Hint, in the past weeks, I've done the top 10 interview questions that you might be asked during an interview. Make sure to go back and watch that or listen to that because I do use REMI like we talked about earlier for this. But take one general interview question and apply your similar values using REMI and your answer that you share with that district. So if it's less technology in the classroom, make sure to use REMI and tailor your answer to what that district and you share in common. So that wraps up everything in regards to if you're using this in your interview, we need to have a talk. So the first thing we talked about was common phrases that teachers use because they feel like it's a buzzword that districts are looking for without actually doing the research. Then we talked about why these don't work and why districts can tell when it feels disingenuous. We talked about what to say instead. And we talked about how you can use my framework, REMI, to answer interview questions. We talked about the identity shift that new teacher next door, aka you, are going to use for your next interview. And then the final step, I gave you some homework so you could take action and start implementing this. So that wraps up everything. If you want next steps and you want to dive deeper into this teacher interview conversation, I have different resources for you. First, I would really appreciate if you could share this with the teacher who's interviewing too, or make sure to give it a like, subscribe, or review wherever you're tuning in from. That way more resources like this can reach more teachers. And the whole reason I do this whole interview thing is because I want good teachers to stay in the profession, and I know a big player in that, or a key component to that, is keeping good teachers in the classroom by matchmaking them with the right district. A lot of teachers are getting burned out because they're not aligning with the districts that they're applying to and working for their first couple of years. And it's just a mismatch, and they end up burning out and they think it's their skills, but in reality, it's not. It's just a misalignment and environment. So please make sure to do that. I would really appreciate it because selfishly, I want good teachers as coworkers, and I want good teachers for Addie when he's old enough. If you want to take a step further, another couple of resources I have for you. First, if you want my top 10 most watched and viewed resources on teacher interview, make sure to check out my free teacher interview guide. It links to the top 10 resources I have, podcasts and YouTube videos all in one spot because let's be honest, I'm at episode 180 something now, so I have a ton of weeks content and it could be a lot to sift through. So if you want interview content in one spot, make sure to go check that out because like I said, I link to other podcasts and YouTube videos so you don't have to sift through all the content. If you want to take it a step further and you want help tailoring your resume and cover letter to the specific district that you're applying to, plus you want help with wording on things like your follow-up email and you want a demo lesson template, make sure to check out the teacher interview bundle. It has everything you're going to need to show up confidently and to apply in a aligned way. If you want to take it one more step and you want help through the entire process, you want me to help you research the right district, figure out what to say, how to show up the day of, and what to say immediately following, make sure to check out Land Your Dream Job. This has been one of my favorites that I love this experience because honestly, the transformations I've seen from other teachers are amazing. I've seen teachers who have applied to dozens of districts end up having that matchmaking in heaven interview that I talked about where it literally feels like a coffee chat with a friend. So make sure to go check that out because I'm telling you, I'm really passionate about this, and this is how good teachers stay in the profession, by figuring out the right district from the get-go. And that's what this experience is all about. So thank you so much for joining us. As always, remember, we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, Teacher Bestie. Bye.